The most powerful woman in Europe stood under the bright lights of live television and, for the first time in years, looked completely cornered. At the center of the storm was Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, the executive arm of the European Union representing more than 450 million citizens across 27 nations. For years, she had built a reputation as an unshakable technocrat, a leader who confronted Silicon Valley giants, challenged global powers, and consolidated regulatory authority in Brussels. But inside the chamber of the European Parliament, that aura appeared to fracture. Members of Parliament pressed her with sharp, pointed questions. Documents were raised. Screens behind her displayed internal communications tied to the EU's pandemic-era vaccine procurement strategy. Cameras captured every expression, every pause, every attempt to respond. The moment was tense, theatrical, and politically explosive. To understand how it reached that point, you have to go back to 2019. Von der Leyen's appointment to lead the European Commission followed intense negotiations among EU leaders. She was not the Spitzenkandidat, the lead candidate system many in Parliament had expected to prevail. Instead, her nomination emerged from high-level compromise among heads of government. When the confirmation vote came, it passed by a margin of just 9 votes. 9 votes separated her from rejection. From that narrow mandate, she went on to centralize decision-making within her presidential cabinet more tightly than many of her predecessors. Supporters described it as decisive leadership in turbulent times, Brexit fallout, geopolitical instability, and then a once-in-a-century pandemic. Critics saw something else, a presidency that relied heavily on a close inner circle, sometimes sidelining traditional commission structures and established consultation channels. Then came April 2021 and the diplomatic episode that would be remembered as Sofagate. During an official visit to Ankara, von der Leyen and European Council President Charles Michel met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. 2 chairs were placed prominently. Michel and Erdogan took them. Von der Leyen was left standing momentarily before being directed to a sofa off to the side. Images of the seating arrangement went viral within minutes. Critics called it a diplomatic failure and a symbolic humiliation. Gender equality advocates were outraged. Brussels responded with procedural explanations and protocol justifications. No resignations followed. The moment passed, but it lingered. The greater controversy, however, would revolve around vaccine procurement during the COVID-19 crisis. At the height of the pandemic, the European Commission negotiated a landmark contract with pharmaceutical giant Pfizer, led by CEO Albert Bourla. The agreement covered up to 1.8 billion doses and was valued at tens of billions of euros, one of the largest procurement contracts in EU history. Reports later revealed that parts of the negotiation involved direct text messages between von der Leyen and Bourla. When journalists, including reporters from the New York Times, requested access to those communications, controversy erupted. The Commission stated that the messages had not been retained in official archives. The issue escalated. The European Ombudsman launched an inquiry and concluded that the Commission's handling of the text messages constituted maladministration due to a failure to properly search for and preserve relevant documents. Von der Leyen defended the overall procurement process, arguing that extraordinary circumstances required swift action and that the strategy ensured equitable vaccine access across member states. Still, critics in Parliament continued pressing for transparency. One of the most persistent voices was Romanian MEP Cristian Terheș. For years, he submitted formal questions and document requests related to the vaccine contracts. According to his statements, internal communications suggested that standard procurement structures were not fully engaged in parts of the negotiation process. He argued that this bypassing of normal channels raised serious governance concerns. During a heated parliamentary session, Terheș presented documents he claimed were obtained through legal procedures and disclosures. Large screens displayed excerpts of internal emails and procurement data comparisons. He alleged that pricing structures may have disadvantaged EU taxpayers compared to certain national-level agreements. Von der Leyen responded by emphasizing the legal and logistical complexities of pandemic procurement, pointing to the urgent context and the need for centralized coordination to avoid competition among member states. She maintained that the Commission acted lawfully and in the best interests of European citizens. But the atmosphere inside the chamber was volatile. MEPs from multiple political groups demanded further clarification. Some called for a formal censure motion. Others urged patience pending ongoing legal proceedings in Belgium and additional audits. At one point, the noise became so intense that the session chair struggled to restore order. Von der Leyen paused, consulted briefly with aides, and ultimately stepped away from the podium. The footage circulated widely across social media platforms within hours. Outside the parliament, public reaction was immediate and divided. In several capitals, Brussels, Berlin, Paris, Warsaw, small protests formed. Online petitions calling for greater transparency gathered signatures rapidly. Meanwhile, many supporters argued that the vaccine strategy had ultimately saved lives and stabilized Europe during its darkest public health emergency. Institutionally, the matter did not end there. Belgian judicial authorities continued reviewing aspects of the procurement process. The ombudsman reopened elements of her inquiry in light of new disclosures. Several member state governments requested independent audits. Within Parliament, discussions of a potential censure vote began circulating more seriously than at any previous point in von der Leyen's tenure. A successful censure motion would require a two-thirds majority of votes cast, representing an absolute majority of all MEPs, a high threshold. Historically, such votes have rarely succeeded, but politically, even the discussion marked a significant shift. For 5 years, von der Leyen had been one of the most influential figures in global regulatory politics, confronting big tech, advancing the Green Deal, shaping sanctions policy against Russia, and navigating transatlantic tensions. Now her leadership faced its most serious test. Whether this episode becomes a footnote in a turbulent presidency or the beginning of its end depends on ongoing investigations, parliamentary arithmetic, and public opinion across 27 nations. One thing is certain: the debate over transparency, accountability, and executive power inside the European Union is no longer confined to committee rooms in Brussels. It is playing out in full public view. And Europe is watching.